So if you haven't really seen it already, this news article just kept me in giggles. I actually really found it really amusing. And you may look at the story and say, how exactly is this a funny story? Well, bear with me and I'll explain it to you. This is the news story that the king of the causes, yes, the king of the causes, visited Israel with senior chiefs and church leaders. Now, the trip was funded and facilitated by Israel's foreign ministry as part of a strategy to build direct ties with South Africa's traditional and religious leaders. Now, the delegation toured the October 7th attack sites and met survivors, hostage families, and Israeli officials who included the president. Now, the delegates were shown 47 minutes of raw, unedited Hamas attack footage, which they described as footage that left them emotional, weeping, and shocked. Israel positioned the visit as proof that many influential South Africans reject the ANC government's anti-Israel stance. Now, if you actually look at the demographics of South Africa, when you do the numbers, it's unusual because the government doesn't support the views of the majority. The majority of South Africans actually support Israel, but the government doesn't actually support that. This is in contrast to what usually happens, and that is most of the people in a country like Indonesia might not support Israel, but the government tends to do so. They create diplomatic ties. Well, our government likes to do things differently. So what actually happened when the king went to Israel? Now, before we get on to that, can I yet again remind you that if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel. It really does help. So, the king called Hamas criminals who must be wiped out and claimed if such an attack happened on his nation, South Africa, he would erase Gaza. Now, this is in reference to the October 7th massacres. Now, he asserted that Israel had been lenient and not genocidal and pushed back strongly against South Africa's ICJ case. And he accused Ramaphosa and the Mandela grandson of spreading propaganda and not knowing the facts. Now, he said the South African media hides the reality of the October 7th attacks, and he praised Israel for helping his rural community during past floods and support he said the South African government had failed to offer. So he actually said that Israel was doing more for his community than South Africa itself was doing. Now, the Israeli embassy posted photos and statements celebrating the king's visit and claiming that many South Africans support Israel despite government hostility. Now, South Africans reacted angrily, and it's the usual suspect South Africans, the usual Twitter bots, saying, "We do not know this king," and rejected Israel's use of the South African flag in its messaging. And this is because the king was there with the flag of South Africa next to a diplomat who was Israeli with their flag. It's normal protocol, but you know how these individuals are. Now, opposition figures and civil rights groups accused the king of being used as Israeli propaganda. Now, the minister in the presidency, that's the ANC minister in the presidency, accused the king of joining misinformation networks allegedly driven by AfriForum and Solidarity. So this is where it starts getting juicy and fun, because apparently now the king of the causes is also one of the individuals going around the world spreading disinformation. Are you noticing how whenever it's information that they don't like, it's always misinformation and disinformation?
The misinformation is only driven from the United States and people here in South Africa who have Solidarity and AfriForum in the main. We see now the king of our temple has joined, but it's for the EFF, who the king is their member, to articulate their position as a party, whether they agree with the notion that is being and the message that is being communicated, the misinformation that is perpetuated by their king. South Africa does not have to hold the government of South Africa does not have to hold a referendum to implement and take positions globally on matters that are in line with our foreign policy approach, but also guided by the fundamental principles of our Constitution.
Now, she then asked for clarity from the EFF. because that king is an EFF member. This is great, right? Because now the EFF, who supports Palestine and is anti-Israeli, has a problem because one of their tribal chiefs is now breaking rank with the anti-Israeli propaganda. And you could see this in the former EFF MP Ndlozi, who said, Israel is trying to buy kings and church leaders with large followings to embarrass the South African government. And as I've said on previous podcasts, the South African government doesn't need others to embarrass them. They can just exist. That's embarrassment enough. Now, the ANC accused the king of participating in foreign interference and aiding Israel's PR strategy during a genocide. Yeah, now you see the whole, foreign interference campaigns. Yeah, like what the ANC did when they were interfering in Israel. I mean, this is always a rule of rules for thee and rules for me, and don't do as I do, do as I tell you. Now, it's interesting to note that right now, genocides are actually occurring this minute in Sudan and Nigeria from the usual individuals who like to perpetrate the ethnic cleansing of the local populations. And let's just say they're not those extreme Buddhists that I keep reading about. In any case, the government is mum on those two events, which does raise the question of whether or not their foreign interference in the Israeli events is potentially politically motivated. Now, what became really interesting is that two further royal houses, yeah, it's a lot of royal houses, then denounced the king's trip. So now the kings are fighting amongst themselves. And they called the visit morally indefensible. They called it propaganda and a betrayal of the anti-apartheid legacy. And they accused the king of bringing his nation into disrepute and questioned his fitness to hold the throne. According to them, the king is not bigger than his nation. And they urged their own form of national dialogue to consider the future of that king's monarchy. Yeah, see how this is all going, right? They're effectively signaling possible internal action against him for having his own views. You have to love these individuals, right? Now, on returning home, this got really spicy because the king held a chaotic press conference. Now, he actually said that he would hold a press conference upon arriving at the airport. And in typical fashion, it was only two journalists that attended from News 24, and both were Muslim. I wonder what approach they took, asking him independent questions and trying to get a greater understanding of how he thought? No! Why are you doing this? Why are you supporting propaganda? Why are you supporting genocide? You know, all the leading questions they all asked. And this resulted in the king swearing at the journalists, calling them ANC prostitutes and telling them to get the F out of my sight. He then suggested that the ANC's Israel policy was, and I quote, bill rubbish. He used the actual real word, not my sanitized version, and said that Ramaphosa acts like a drunken monkey. His words, not mine. Now, he declared that he would continue accepting help from Israel and would not listen to ANC propaganda. And he refused to visit Gaza after all those journalists were like, do you go to Gaza? Because that's all that matters to these individuals. And he said that Hamas hides behind religion and is responsible for Palestinian suffering. Pretty accurate, actually. Now, in typical fashion, the South African analysts are saying that Israel is using figures like this king to counter global media framing that paints Israel negatively. That isn't a conspiracy that is occurring. It is well known, and many of the media houses have actually had to issue apologies and do investigations as to how those media houses themselves had been captured by many Islamist organizations in order to promote pro-Palestinian foreign policy. This is not a conspiracy theory, it's conspiracy fact. Now, the king's statements challenged the ANC's dominance in shaping South Africa's opinion on the conflict, and I would agree with that. In fact, so would the DA and everyone else. The ANC still thinks that South Africa's foreign policy should be decided by them and them alone. So the visit revealed a growing divide between South Africa's pro-Palestinian foreign policy. See how we say South African? It's not. It's the ANC's pro-Palestinian foreign policy, and the segments of South Africa, such as traditional leaders and churches, who are more sympathetic to Israel. Well, they would be, because many of the churches are Zionist in nature and that they feel Israel at least has a right to exist, exclude everything else. So what does this actually show? Well, it actually shows fractures within the Xhosa monarchy, the ANC's moral authority being completely bogus, and now EFF internal policy alignments and how that's shaping, because this is an EFF card-carrying king. So yeah, that's really going to cause some new political divides amongst all these individuals, isn't it? And I, for one, say, bring on the popcorn, because this was great. Watching that journo getting sworn at, like the News 24 journo, with all his leading questions, was just beautiful. Anyway, that's just my opinions. Let me know what you think in the comment section below. And until next time, bye.
Greetings from kibbutz. From where I stand, I'm about 1.5 kilometers from Gaza. I would like to, tell anyone who is listening, anyone who has been worried about the fight between the Palestinians and the Israelis. It must be told in the true sense, in a way that people must understand that you cannot give the blame to the Israelis for what they have retaliated to. Retaliation comes from brutal actions that came from the Hamas, from the people who call themselves revolutionaries. I've never seen a revolutionary rape a child, rape a mother, rape a grandmother, kill a whole family in one house for no apparent reason. Everybody knows that in war, you are not allowed to kill children. You are not allowed to kill women. You are not allowed to attack civilians that are simply unarmed, defenseless. And when you do that as a soldier or as a revolutionary, are you truly one or just a devil's advocate? We would like people like Cyril Ramaphosa, people like Mandla Mandela, not to continue with their propaganda. They must now get to know the story from the side of the Israelis. They endured the greatest of pain. I believe that as a person, if this had happened to my people, given the power that Israel has, whether militarily or what, they were very lenient in their retaliation. Otherwise, a cruel man like myself would wipe out everything in Gaza. They are lucky. I call them lucky because the Israelites, they are good people at heart. They are good people at heart. They've done good things not only to us as South Africans, Africans, Zambians, people who are in need of support. They get support. What parent, what leader would do nothing, sit back and fold arms when the children are dying from criminals, from people who want the world to see them as people who fight for a very fantastic goal? These guys have no mission, have no goal. They're simply criminals who must be brought to justice. If you speak of people who want to bring Premier Benjamin Netanyahu to justice, I believe you will be playing games. If you can bring Hamas to justice first, before you talk about the Premier, I will understand you. But if you see Benjamin Netanyahu is guilty, then you are blind. You need to open up your mind. You need to come and hear from the Israelis themselves. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. What I've seen here is a very sad story. And it's something that must never happen to any nation and to any community. May Hamas stop whatever it does and come back to senses. Thank you very much.